The next artist who we're going to look at is Joan Eardley. Joan Eardley painted this portrait. There are some similarities between this portrait of the little boy, that's by Joan Eardley, and the portrait of the king that we've already looked at. For example, one of the similarities is that both portraits show the whole length of the body. But there are some differences between the two portraits too. For a start, this portrait is much smaller than the portrait of King George. Let's look at the difference in size. If we look closely at the portrait, we can see that Joan Eardley has a different style of painting to Thomas Lawrence. Thomas Lawrence wanted to paint his portrait of the king to look realistic. Joan Eardley's painting isn't quite as realistic. For example, there's a random blue blob of paint on the boy's face. Joan Eardley painted her portrait very quickly, so she didn't have time to be all neat and tidy like Thomas Lawrence did. But maybe she didn't want to be neat and tidy either. Joan Eardley's style of painting is what we call modern art. This young boy looks as though he's wearing clothes that don't really fit him properly. In fact, he looks quite poor. Can you see what he's carrying? He's holding a milk bottle, and he's holding it really tight. This young boy lived in Glasgow in Scotland, and this was painted just after the Second World War, so it's in the late 1940s. Now, during this time, there was lots of poverty, and lots of people didn't have enough money to buy nice clothes or even enough food sometimes. Joan Eardley painted lots of young children like this. She wanted to show how unfair it was that some people were poor and were struggling to get by. To the side of the boy, just behind him, you can see some shapes. Now, to start with, they kind of look like random shapes. But if we look closely, we can see that it looks like the bottom half of a person. You can see the legs, for example. And it looks like the person is walking away from the boy. I wonder who the person is. I've got a feeling that the person is possibly the boy's mum. Maybe that's why he's looking so sad, because she's walking away from him. The bottle of milk that he's holding, well, that might be the only food and nourishment that he's got for the whole of the rest of the day until his mum gets back. We don't know this for sure, but what we do know is that Joan Eardley, well, she wanted to make this a sad painting. To help to make this painting look sad, Joan Eardley used dark colours. Colours like browns and greys and dark greens too. Sometimes colours can represent feelings. For example, bright colours can make us feel happy, whereas dark colours can make us feel sad. The artist wanted us to feel sorry for the boy. She wanted to show us how unfair the world can be sometimes. We've already said that the boy looks sad, and if we look at his expression, we can see that. Maybe there are other words we can think of too. For example, I think he looks lonely. So expressions in portraits are very important because it helps to show how a person is feeling. Maybe you guys could do some expressions in the classroom. You could do some familiar expressions that we've already talked about, things like happy or sad, but you could try other expressions too. How would you do a grumpy face or a surprised face? Maybe you could do some expressions and get your classmates to decide what the expression is.